Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Chat and Vibe series for the Vitality Festival, which is starting on October the 31st. We've got 8 beautiful days organised for the frontliners. It's a free online health and wellbeing festival. And today we've got with us Andrea Featherstone, who's one of our lovely presenters. How are you, Andrea?
I'm good. Thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for joining us here on this series. Tell us a little bit about how you got to be where you are right now.
That's a good question. How I got to be where I am right now. My background's actually in architecture, so I wasn't planning. I'm now a mindfulness consultant, and I have been for about 6 or 7 years now. And I was very skeptical about the whole world of personal development and mindfulness and things. So yeah, definitely wasn't planning to get here, but basically through, I don't know, having a hard time really, discovered some of this mindfulness stuff, and it helped a lot of areas of my life. I often say in my big corporate workshops that I run that public speaking used to be one of my biggest fears. I was really, really, really insecure. And yeah, when I learned the tools that I learned with mindfulness, which we can talk about a bit more, and I'll be talking about in the workshop that I'm running, I just, shifted a lot of things, a lot of my insecurities, and it just helped me get a lot more clarity and a lot more confidence. So that's how I've ended up being a mindfulness consultant. Whereas in the past, I would have thought only weird hippies do that. I used to honestly think. I was really, really skeptical and quite like angry, cynical, like a real pessimist. So it's quite surprising to me that I'm here.
And so tell us a little bit about what is a mindfulness coach?
That's a good question. Basically, I mean, it's so funny because mindfulness is quite well known now, but only about 5 or 6 years ago, I was telling people I'm a mindfulness coach, I'm a mindfulness consultant. And I had one Uber driver go, "Do you mean like schizophrenia, that voice in your head, that schizophrenia, right?" And I was like, no, we all have a voice in our heads. So essentially I just help people to work out how to tame the voice in their head. It's always talking to you, worrying about things, ruminating on mistakes you've made, talking about your insecurities, or maybe talking about how great you are, but sometimes that doesn't work for other people, so just I coach people on how to separate a little bit from the voice in their head, because it's not something we're taught at school generally, and it can lead to a lot of stress, anxiety, depression, all the things.
And I think a lot of people at the moment who are feeling stressed and fearful with what's going on, do you think that tends to agitate that voice inside the head, or the volume gets turned up? Is that what you find?
100%. I mean, I think of the mind. The mind is like the lungs or the heart. It's not you. It's a thing that's doing its own thing to try to keep you alive. So the more danger, the more threats that appear to be happening in the world, the faster the mind gets to try to keep you safe, basically, which can, if you haven't learned how to tame it, it builds momentum, more stress, and then you're around a lot of stressed people. So even if you're feeling calm, not long until other people's stress starts to affect you, so I think probably stress is more contagious than COVID, I'd say. It's I'm very busy in my work at the moment because I work in helping people to reduce stress. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a good time. It's, on the other hand, though, times like this are usually the only time any of us bother to learn something like mindfulness, because it's not that fun to train your mind. It's like training a new muscle that you can't really be bothered. It's like doing press up and you're bad at it, so you're like, no, I don't want to. So same for me. People wait till they're really suffering to bother to learn this stuff. So I don't know. I see a big opportunity in all this crazy COVID stuff to help us.
And so tell me, does mindfulness equal meditation, or are they different things?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's not the same thing. And I'm really big on the other part of mindfulness. It's not meditation, which is the daily practice. So I used to work on a super yacht for a Russian billionaire, and I used to vacuum all day. It sounds very glamorous. It's actually the most unglamorous thing ever. It's just basically a 7-star cleaner. So I'd be cleaning, and I'd just get really, really angry. And I found that when I started practicing mindfulness during that time, I was focusing on, my bicep, or focusing on the vacuuming, focusing on the sound of it, the carpet under my feet. All of those things are also considered mindfulness. It's anything where you're training your attention to focus on what you're doing. It stops you. It actually deactivates the part of the brain that's talking all the time. And that helps you to, it helps you, even if you're not particularly enjoying what you're doing, like vacuuming, for example, it just stops the additional crap that's going on. So Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
meditation is great also because it's kind of like a focused training ground for training your brain, training your mind to stay focused, kind of like the gym versus walking around and doing incidental exercise. So if you meditate, you get better at mindfulness faster, which is useful, but you don't need to do it. And I learned mindfulness a full year before I ever learned to meditate, and it completely shifted my life. So I'm really passionate about the separate side of it that is not meditation, because not everyone wants to meditate. It's be honest, it's not always very fun. When you're stressed, you sit down and meditate, you're just going to notice how stressed you are. And that's sometimes pretty confronting for people.
So I think, a lot of people at the moment are, like we said before, really, really stressed, and it sends their thoughts reeling in all sorts of different directions. And from what you're saying, part of what the mindfulness that you teach is about reeling it in and bringing the mind into the present moment. Whereas I know for a lot of people, when they go to sit down, when their mind is crazy, it's just like, it doesn't want to sit down with you. So what would you say to people like that?
Yeah, it's it's so true. You sit down and the mind's like, you sit well. We have between 30,000 to 100,000 thoughts per day. So when you sit down to meditate, those don't just switch off. You just become super aware of how much ridiculousness, and you also start to become aware of just how ridiculous your thoughts are. When you really watch them, you can sometimes go through life thinking, I'm a bit of a genius, aren't I? I'm very clever. And then you listen to what's actually happening in there. It's not very helpful, and it's not very clever. So yeah, you can learn to separate from that. I've actually forgotten what the question was. My mind wandered off just then.
So what I asked was for the people who are, particularly stressed at the moment, and their thoughts are just really reeling all the time. With mindfulness, you were saying that it helps to bring your mind into the present moment. Whereas a lot of people, when they sit down, the thoughts just get so much louder inside the head. So for people who are currently, some of these frontline workers are so exhausted and stressed out, and their mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. What's some advice that you would give to these people that could help them, even right now?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I had a point and then I lost it. Actually, the best advice I can give is the part of mindfulness that most people completely miss and don't seem to learn, even when they've been meditating for years. Sometimes I have to retrain them on this, is this idea of non-judgment. So not getting angry at your mind for being so busy. Because a lot of people will sit down and they're like, okay, meditate. And then they're like, meditate. I'm going to meditate on my breath. I'm going to feel calm. And then the mind's like, and they're like, God, I'm so busy and I'm stressed and it's so annoying and I'm terrible at this. And then they just jump up and give off, like walk off or whatever. But if you can think about the mind a bit like a puppy instead, you wouldn't kick a puppy, hopefully. Although I did have one corporate workshop where I was like, would anyone kick a puppy if you were training a puppy? And one guy was like, absolutely. And I was like, okay, anyone else? But most of all, we know that to train a puppy, if you want it to sit next to you, you bring it, you sit it there, you say sit, it's like, and then it just runs off. You don't get angry at it, you don't kick it, you don't shout at it, you just patiently bring it back, sit it down, then it runs off again, patience, non-judgment. It's just a puppy. Bring it back, sit it down. The same is true with the mind. You just bring it back. You don't get angry at it because it's designed to wander off. That's actually our default mode. Bring it back. Over time, you get better and better at not getting aggressive at your mind itself, and that really down regulates the stress response. So it is a different thing we have to train, because as humans, we're not, from a pretty young age, we're taught that bad equals bad, like get rid of uncomfortable feelings, like anything that feels sad or angry, don't talk about that. And so over time, we build up this, aversion to anything uncomfortable. So it's a big training process of undoing that and becoming used to sitting with uncomfortable things like stress and busy minds. So treat your mind like a puppy and don't kick it. That's my advice.
So I think it's also people really need to learn to be kind to themselves. You were saying that we really judge ourselves, which I think a lot of people tend to do, and we're always a lot harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And I think particularly at this time, we all just need to be kind and positive towards ourselves, so we sort of rise to the occasion rather than sort of, like you're saying, like kicking a puppy.
Yeah, it is very much easier said than done, though, isn't it? I'm thinking there's probably some people in this amazing festival that's going to be talking about self-compassion, hopefully, because it's a real training ground. It's not like people think, oh, it's a bit fluffy and just love yourself. It's so how obviously I'd do that if I knew, but the training process of it is so effective. It's research behind it is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know, you have a few
Yeah, we do have a few people talking about that. And I know it's, one of humans' basic reaction is that when they're looking at themselves, first of all, they judge, and then the next one they do is they compare, and then they criticize, and they all sort of seem to go together. And they are kind of lessons of how to love yourself, as those things. So people really need to stop doing them, not only to themselves, with other people, and it tends to be a lot easier journey for them. Absolutely.
Yeah, you can start with other people, turn around the other way. Another thing that's really helpful as well, like you said, you just look in the mirror or so, and your mind, well, for me, I look in the mirror, my mind's like, God, you're looking wrinkly. And one thing I say to people is, don't ask yourself, is that thought true? Because it might be, like, oh God, COVID's stressful. Yeah, true. But is it helpful? So ask yourself, is this helpful? And if it's not helpful, you let the thought be there, but you bring your attention back to what you're doing, so yes, I have more wrinkles than when I was 20 or whatever, but when I'm looking in the mirror, it's not helpful for me to be thinking about that. So I'm like, okay, thank you, mind. Bring my attention back to what I'm doing, like brushing my teeth, or, for example, on that.
I think what's interesting is I remember reading one of Eckhart Tolle's books, and he was talking about watching the mind in terms of mindfulness. And what I found interesting, what he said, is that when you watch the mind, it's almost that there's a part of you that starts witnessing the talking. So it's like there's a few of you inside. It's not just one part of you. And I think that's really one of the things that you help people to do, is tame that inner voice inside the head, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I think that's one of the biggest things from mindfulness, is realizing there's you, that's your attention, and then there's the mind. But a lot of people live like this. So thoughts equal me, and they don't know how to separate. So I'm stressed. Oh yeah, I'm stressed. Rather than, oh, my body is experiencing stress. Oh, my mind's really busy, which is a very different experience when you're observing it like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. So at the festival, your presentation is about clarity in COVID. Tell us a little bit about what people would experience in your workshop.
Yeah, we're going to do what I said before, like an informal mindfulness exercise, where we're actually going to learn, like, how do you train your mind during your daily life, like while you're at work or when you're in the midst of things. Because you can't, especially if you're some kind of emergency service worker, you can't be like in the middle of an emergency and be like, stand by guys, I'm having a bit of stress, just going to pop over there to meditate. Like, not possible, right? You need to be able to train your attention right in the moment. So we're going to do a little exercise on that, and the whole workshop's really going to be focused around how to tame that voice in your head, but also when you do that, how to get clarity. Because what I'm finding with a lot of my corporate clients is that they're getting more indecisive than ever, because the mind is, like you said at the start, really gaining so much momentum, that there's just so much going on in the brain that you can't even make simple decisions like what I'm going to have for dinner. Like, your nervous system is just getting so wired that. So we're going to focus on how are some really simple, easy to implement techniques that don't actually take any extra time out of your day to stop the mind from clouding your thoughts so much, because there's another part of you, like you said, there's the watcher, then there's the mind, and there's a really intelligent part of you that comes up with genius thoughts every now and then, but it's very quiet. Mind is too busy, you can't hear it, so you lose a lot of clarity. So one of the things I do in my business is I work with indecisive overachievers, often to help them make a big decision, like, should I change career, should I leave my relationship, should I move city, something like that. And often they have overthought it for years already, and the more they overthink it, the more stuck they become. So we work on so we're going to talk about some of that stuff in the workshop, because I think that's relevant for everyone right now. Just, even if you don't have a big decision, just, how do I know what to have for dinner at this point?
I think that's great. And I think one of the things that's amazing about Andrea is that she really simplifies the terminology behind mindfulness. And there's a lot of people talking about mindfulness, and not that anyone's better or worse, but some people really work more with the spiritual side of things, whereas Andrea's expertise is really about bringing it down and making it really tangible and accessible to anybody and everybody. So you don't need to have experience you don't need to be able to stand on your head and do yoga and do all those things. And like you've said, you don't need to talk about chakras, but you use really common, easy, accessible language and skills. So I can't recommend this enough to anybody. It doesn't make a difference what field you're in, whether you had experience or not. I think it's really amazing how Andrea makes it so accessible for everybody. So tell us a bit in this time, Andrea, what challenges have you found the most for you?
For me particularly?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been plenty because I usually run corporate workshops in person. So I had all these big, like full day workshops, which you just can't really convert to Zoom workshops. It would be hell. A full day on Zoom would be hell. So I obviously lost a lot of work from when COVID hit immediately. And I just went into, okay, God, what am I going to do to get the money back, and all that kind of overthinking that happens. I also run an Airbnb, which is, of course, not currently working. So it was a lot of stress when it first hit, and I had a big meltdown. But actually, out of that, what I really learned is that I actually have to be a lot, almost sometimes you just need to learn to surrender a bit more. So kind of like that self-compassion thing you were talking about earlier, I've really learned that this year. And as a bit of a skeptic and a bit of a cynic myself, I've got a bunch of friends who are psychologists. They've been telling me about self-compassion for years, and I'm like, yeah, I've got whatever, because love yourself. No, I don't want to.
Yeah.
So, but COVID kind of made it necessary, because what happened just after all that, I was really lucky. I'm lucky to be in an industry where it's really needed right now, stress reduction. So I went from all that loss and stress to like, bam, straight into just being hammered with workshops on Zoom. So I was running 3 or 4 workshops a day, corporate workshops for thousands of people. And I was starting to just notice I was stopping being able to talk to people on the phone. Like I was just getting really, really drained. And so I had no choice but to start asking myself, okay, what do I actually need after this crazy big work day? Like what, and sometimes what I needed was lie. I'm just going to lie on the floor. I'm not going to even be able to watch TV or podcasts, or don't talk to anyone. And for an overachiever, or like most of the people I work with, that's actually really hard work to let yourself off the hook from not being productive at all times. So that was a massive learning for me. And it's actually been a massive game changer, because I think I needed to be pushed right over the edge in order to learn that I actually need to take care of myself before I get to that level. Otherwise, and I'm sure that's super relevant for a lot of the people who are on the front line right now. Unfortunately, not having the choice of whether to slow down or not. So what they do in their free time is like so much more important to keep the energy, for themselves, not even just for the people they're helping.
Yeah, and I think that's very much the case with a lot of frontliners. They're always taking care of everybody else. They're not taking care of themselves, which I think, is so important. We've had a few other speakers who have really highlighted that as well, And then I think also for a lot of other people who are running their own businesses, with everything being on Zoom, there's no start. The start time is way earlier than it was. The finish time is way later than it was. And I think, people being mindful enough to gauge how they're coping with whatever situation they're in, whether it's being a mum with young kids screaming around you, or whether it's being one of the nurses in the hospitals. I mean, there's so many different ranges of the stress that people are experiencing, and people just have to be really aware of what they need to deal with it.
Yeah, it's so hard because we're not really taught to ask ourselves what we need. It's all just sort of looked down on, to be like, well, that's a bit selfish. You don't need to be thinking about yourself. But we're at a point now where you kind of don't have a choice. It's like that age-old, put your mask on first before helping other people. You actually run out of energy, and then you're no good to anyone. So it's actually super important. But that process of working out what do I need is actually quite hard. Like I found it really hard.
Yeah, it is. And like you say, because it's not something we're naturally taught in schools, and it'd be something great that we can try and impart to our kids to ask themselves all the time. But I've got 2 teenage boys, and in between doing a lot of this stuff and everything, there's like, what do I need? I just need more time on my Xbox.
Yeah, it may not be, well, that might be the mind, like, I need more food, I need more Coca-Cola and a little bit of Xbox.
Yeah. And so tell me, what are you excited about moving forward?
With COVID, like all the things?
Just with your life, with everything, with what's coming up. Have you got anything particularly exciting to look forward to?
Yeah, I do. I've got a lot of really cool work opportunities coming up. It's been a weird year because I usually travel for up to 4 or 5, maybe 6 months of the year, which of course I'm not doing anymore. But it's been really nice because it's enabled me and my team to really like focus on a bunch of stuff in my business and kind of get things working a lot more a lot better. So I've got some really cool corporate workshops coming up. I'm going to be training some psychologists, which I'm really looking forward to, because I'm passionate about mindfulness for any kind of practitioners. I also work at Monash University and teach mindfulness to the little mid-student doctors who are going to become our future doctors. And I'm quite passionate about all kind of healthcare workers understanding the value of being present with the people in front of them, because it's not just what the drugs they're giving or the advice they're giving. What really matters is that they feel connected to the patient, and the patient feels like, oh, this person hears me. That has a massive effect on people. So I'm feeling excited about having some of those opportunities, and I've got some workshops coming up with like Victoria Police, and I often work with a lot of frontliners anyway, because I specialize in working with cynics and skeptics, which are a lot of frontline workers. So yeah, lots going on. It's really exciting. I'm also really excited for how the world is going to shift. I know there's some quite terrible and dramatic things happening, but I always, in my view, out of great suffering comes huge learning. Like, as humans, we just coast. When things are easy, we just coast. We need, like, just like when you exercise, you break down your muscles, it hurts and they get stronger. I just think the world is going through that on a massive, it's hurting, stuff is hurting, it's painful, it's a big, huge mess, but I think there's massive growth, and like people are going to wake up out of it, which I think is going to be really amazing.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much. We're really looking forward to having you as part of the Vitality Festival. I can't recommend Andrea's workshop enough. We'd love to see you. If you haven't joined up yet, the link is below. And if you want to find Andrea, I'm going to pop her website on there as well, so you can contact her for any information that you might need. Thank you so much, Andrea. I wish you well in all your future endeavours, and look forward to seeing you again soon at the Vitality Festival.
Thanks so much.
Bye.